Hello and welcome to another action-packed, exciting hour of the Smoky Mountain Wrestling Re-Watch-Along Project. This is podcasting the way it used to be and the way you like it. This show is a production of the Something Else Podcasting Network, and it is episode number 056 of Smoky Mountain Wrestling from February 20th, 1993, taped February 8th, 1993, at the Jellicoe High School in Jellicoe, Tennessee. My name is Arya, and welcome to the show. Now, if you've already listened to something else, and if you haven't, just go one episode back and listen to that first. We have a new co-host, and he's managed to make it to our second show of the week. So please welcome, without any further ado, Trae.
Yeah, well, we got so much wonderful feedback on the last show that I just had to give it another show. I'm bullshitting. We recorded that 5 minutes ago.
Breaking kayfabe over here. Bill Watts would fine you for doing that.
Bill Watts would fine me for a great many things.
Probably. So, the normal spiel we go through every week, in case it's the first time you've ever watched or listened to this show, what we do, it is really quite simple. We watch every single episode of Smoky Mountain Wrestling, beginning with episode number 1 on February 1st, 1992. We go all the way to episode number 200 on November 26th, 1995. We talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, the indifferent, the so-so, the okay, the tremendous, the wonderful, the amazing, the awful, the memorable, the unforgettable, the stuff you've already forgotten. We watch some matches, we talk about some angles, we listen to some promos, and ultimately we have fun for an hour diving into the Smoky Mountains. And you would think for the number of times I say that, I would have written it down so I didn't keep stumbling over it. But what's the joy in writing it down? To see just how many adjectives I can throw out in a 30-second period. And then at the end of the episode, I also tell you what else is happening this week in wrestling, because I can tell you February 20th, 1993 until I'm blue in the face. However, I tell you what else has happened, so you can sit here and go, oh yeah, that happened. This happened at the same time? It did. So we do that at the end to kind of ease you into the weekend, even though the show drops on a Thursday. So Trae, we asked you about this, about Mid-South and World Class. Going into this little endeavor, how familiar are you with Smoky Mountain Wrestling?
Have heard a lot about it, but this is actually my first time watching any.
Nice. Well, hopefully it doesn't scare you away, or we don't scare you away here. But let's go to the intro with Bob Caudle and Dr. Dutch Mantell. We're going to preview this week's episode, and then we're going to be joined by Dirty White Boy.
Welcome to another exciting action-packed hour of Smoky Mountain Wrestling. Wrestling the way it used to be and the way you like it. Hi, wrestling fans. I'm Bob Caudle, and we got a great hour in store for all you wrestling fans this week. We're going to be seeing our heavyweight champion, the Dirty White Boy. He's going to be here. Primetime Brian Lee. Also, we're going to be hearing from Kevin Sullivan. We've got a ruling from the office of the commissioner, and Commissioner Bob Armstrong will be here to tell us all about that ruling. Our TV main event, Rock and Roll Express against the Stud Stable. And here's my partner, Dutch Mantell.
Dr. Dutch Mantell.
I don't know why that doesn't seem to register with me, Dutch.
I got a few things to say. After today's main event, number 1 contender match, the Stud Stable versus the Rock and Roll Express, and there will be no question who will be number 1 after today, and of course, my team, the Stud Stable. Now, talking about beat the champ.
Yeah, what about, we got to have an opponent for Tracy Smothers, and Dutch, he can be $5,000 richer after the match this week.
Well, we don't know. We're going to draw a name, and an act of fairness, I put everybody's name in here. I would like to draw a name right now, and that name is, the Nightstalker. The Nightstalker will take on Tracy Smothers.
The Dirty White Boy.
Baby. Hey, Tracy Smothers, I told you wouldn't get $5,000 richer. Did you see this name that was pulled out? The Nightstalker. There's no way that you can beat the Nightstalker, and there's no way if you can't beat him, you can't get $5,000 richer.
All right, fans, that does remain to be seen. We're about ready with action right now, so let's go to the ring.
Where's my name at?
All right, so today's the big day for Tracy Smothers. It's his 5th and final defense of the Beat the Champ TV title. If he wins today, he retires undefeated and gets the $5,000 bonus. However, it's not even his biggest opponent, because like he wrestled Orndorff last week, or the week, that was last week. And but Nightstalker physically is his biggest opponent, we'll say that. And then, of course, we're going to have the Rock and Roll Express versus the Stud Stable in a number one contender match as our actual main event. And White Boy proclaims there's no way that Tracy can beat Nightstalker, and that means there's no way Tracy can beat him.
Dirty White Boy really does not want Tracy Smothers to get $5,000. And by the end of this, neither did I. But we'll talk about that. What was the deal with Dutch's cue cards that say real men don't join the military?
So I honestly didn't even register it at first until actually during the 6-man tag he talks more about the military.
Yeah.
But so Dutch has made it a habit during these shows of writing a note on the back of his format sheet to show in front of the crowd. And to be honest, unless it pops me, I just kind of ignore it. And this was one of those episodes I just kind of ignored. But if you watch these shows, and again, we're not going to get too political here, but it's kind of one of those obvious things that Dutch is, at least I don't know if he still is, but it's pretty obvious that he was at least conservative in a prior life. But that's for his own personal proclivities. Anywho, we'll go to the first match. It is a 6-man tag. Dixie Dynamite, Reno Riggins, and Len Fields versus the Heavenly Bodies with Jim Cornette. This continues our age-old theory that Dixie kicks off every TV taping we have. This is the first taping from Jellicoe, Tennessee. However, now, of course, it's not entirely true. Dixie doesn't kick off every TV taping. But of all the people on the roster, he's one of the better options they have, because like he almost always gets a good reaction, and the fans do love him, even if it is a lot of stars and bars and that kind of fun crap. Now,
yeah.
So this is all 3 members of the Heavenly Bodies, including Bob Eaton, in his first TV match here in Smoky Mountain. And Dutch has a very 1993 quote, which brings up the military part, because this is right after President Clinton rescinded the ban on gays in the military, doing the don't ask, don't tell thing. And Dutch mentions that he doesn't want the Heavenly Bodies and Jim Cornette tripping over themselves to go enlist now. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the one thing that, unfortunately, Eaton is not going to be here that long because Bill Watts is out of WCW, so the WCW Smoky Mountain relationship is closer to the end than the beginning. But I thought they do a good job of teasing dissension between Eaton and Dr. Tom, because they're both Stan Lane's partner. And Bob Eaton is obviously his more famous partner, but Dr. Tom's been his partner for a year, and they've been 5-time tag team champions together. So I thought they do a good job of teasing it a little bit. And obviously, if this relationship had continued, there would probably have been a lot more to it. Because, hey, Jimmy Del Rey is right around the corner. But, for a number of reasons, this feud was never really going to happen. But Tom and Bobby actually crash into each other and had to be held apart for a second, but that quickly gets ignored. Reno Riggins, who I honestly thought we never saw him again after a few weeks ago when he turned down Mr. Ron Wright, his first move was to run into the ring and get clotheslined. Okay. So Len Fields, whoever the hell he is, got a tag, ran into the ring, and was immediately dropped with a sit-out powerbomb and pinned by Eaton after the Alabama Jam. A longer than usual opener, as it goes close to 8 minutes, but I didn't think it really picked up. But you thought, it was your favorite match on this show.
I thought this was a lot of fun. It was very fast-paced. They went hard. It was only about 6 minutes, but they went hard for the time that they were given. Had a neat little story with Bobby and Dr. Tom fighting for the love of Stan Lane. And there is something important about the finish that the announcers did not note, and you also did not note, but I noted.
And that is?
You say they won with a combination power bomb, Alabama Jam, or whatever. That was, in fact, the Veg-O-Matic, the old Midnight Express finisher.
That it was. No lies.
So I thought that was a could be a relevant part of the story, with the story being, like I said, they're fighting for the love of Sweet Stan, and Bobby and Stan won with the old Midnight Express finish.
Yep. And but they're building up this three-way feud here with the Rock and Roll Express and Stud Stable. And speaking of which, the Rock and Roll Express have shown up at the desk for a quick interview with Bob Caudle.
All right, fans, with us right now, here's Rock and Roll Express. Ricky Morton, Robert Gibson. Hey, Robert, you guys have got a big match coming up. #1 contender match.
That's right, against the Stud Stable. Let me tell you something, Stud Stable, right here, late on this program. We're going to see who the #1 contenders is, because what happens is Jim Cornette's got something that belongs to us. I'm talking about Smoky Mountain Tag Team Championship belts. Isn't that right, Rick?
How about that, Rick?
Today, the Stud Stable. Tomorrow, the Heavenly Bodies. You see one thing, Jimmy Cornette, we found out a long time ago. Either you can scratch with the chickens or you can fly with the eagles. And baby, we got wings, because those Smoky Mountain titles belong to us. And you're not going to stop us. No way, Cornette. We don't care if you got 15 Heavenly Bodies. Rock and roll's here to stay. And one thing about it, Stud Stable, you're standing in our way between us and the Heavenly Bodies. And it's all going to come to a head later on in the show today, Bob. All right.
All right, fans.
All right. So I'll let you go. To me, this Rock and Roll Express promo was kind of old hat. It's been a lot of what we've seen Ricky Morton say repeatedly when they haven't been champions. Because, spoiler to people just checking this out, ever since the Fantastics lost the belts to the Heavenly Bodies in August, it's just been going back and forth between the Bodies and the Rock and Rolls, and now the Bodies have them. So it's now time for the Rock and Roll We Want Our Titles Back promo, which will be followed at some point by the Heavenly Bodies We Want Our Title Back promo, and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. But Trae, your thoughts on that one?
Whenever I see a Rock and Roll Express promo, I just wonder why they were so over. That is my analysis of this interview.
Really? Robert Gibson, but Ricky Morton is a very likable person, I thought.
Yeah, and they're certainly passionate. And I don't know. I don't understand maybe what people who are attracted to men are attracted to, but I cannot fathom why these men were considered sex symbols throughout the South in the 80s into the 90s.
I think it helps when you sleep with any woman who looks twice at you.
That's fair.
Hey, I'm into guys, and they're not my type, but, everyone's into their own thing. Just say that. So after a 3-week hiatus where Bullet Bob, our venerable commissioner, was in Japan, he's back from Japan. And he's going to cut a promo, and that's going to segue into a fun, interesting little Kevin Sullivan promo. So let's go to Bullet Bob. Take a deep seat, because this one's going to go for a few minutes.
Hey, fans, with me right now, here's Smoky Mountain Commissioner Bob Armstrong. And, Commissioner, you've been out of the country now for 3 weeks, and while you've been gone, some of the guys have sort of been taking things into their own hands, doing a lot of things that shouldn't be happening.
You know, Bob, since I left the country, a lot of things have happened. I've come back to total chaos. I've had to roll up my sleeves, throw on my Smoky Mountain hat, and dig into it. First problem. Jimmy Cornette and his Heavenly Bodies have incorporated themselves. They got a new man, Bobby Eaton. How can 3 men defend a tag title? We're looking at the rule books right now. We're going to find a way to get out of this mess. Number 2, Paul Orndorff pile drive the referee, Daryl Morris, right here on TV in front of everybody. How many times have I told him not to? How many times have I fined him? Well, I've told you for the last time. 2 days ago, I suspended Paul Orndorff indefinitely. He's out of here. Now, when he learns to obey the rules, he can come back. Now, the worst thing that happened while I was gone, a regular routine insurance form came into our offices, and our secretary signed it thinking it was just a medical request. It turned out to be a bill from Kevin Sullivan, psychiatrist, and brother, it wasn't cheap. Now we're stuck. It's got our stamp of approval. We got to pay for it, or his lawyers will take us to court. Now he's really taking advantage. He thinks he's got the upper hand. I want to show you a tape of just what this evil-eyed idiot is doing and taking advantage of this situation.
My man, how about something from me?
Would you like a libation?
I'd love a libation.
I think we have just what you would like. There you are.
Well, let me get...
Oh, no, Mr. Sullivan, your money is not good here.
Oh, I like that.
And you will like that also.
You know, I know you. I've seen you before. You're the caretaker.
Oh, no.
You're the guy that took the spike and stabbed the whole Armstrong family. You're the caretaker.
No, Mr. Sullivan, I have been here a very long time, and you are the caretaker. In fact, you have always been the caretaker.
I guess he's right. I've always been the caretaker. Well, I got some good news, and I got some bad news. The good news is Smoky Mountain Wrestling and Commissioner Armstrong is going to pay for my therapy. The bad news is they say I'm broken. But I went out and I hired the greatest therapist of all times, Dr. Michael Phillips, and let me introduce him to you people.
Yes, Mr. Sullivan, we're going to take care of you. We're going to put you back together. We're going to put you back together just like a chess game, and you be well. But it's going to take long sessions, and it's also your cranium needs massage, at least 4 to 5 times a day. Nurse Cratchit?
Yes, doctor.
We need your he needs his medication.
Medication? I love it.
Here you go, Mr. Sullivan.
I feel better already. Do I have to drink it all?
Why, yes, you do, sir.
Anything the nurse says.
Oh, I see you have a gammon.
It's backgammon. I never lose at any game I play. Listen to me, Commissioner Armstrong, Brian Lee, Mongolian Stomper, Timmy Horner, Tracy Smothers. I've never lost at any game I've ever played. Here's to you in Smoky Mountain Wrestling.
Alrighty. So, yeah. So Bullet Bob's secretary is an idiot. She signed a form that apparently makes Smoky Mountain legally have to pay the psychiatric bills for Kevin Sullivan, which he has a lot of psychiatric bills apparently, 4 to 5 sessions a day. And I got to tell you, you know, I've had a lot of psychiatric sessions in my life. I never had 4 or 5 sessions per day.
I was so baffled by all of this. I didn't really know what was going on, but I was thoroughly convinced that Kevin Sullivan needs therapy.
And I mean, I hate to, I would say I hate bringing this up, and I'm going to bring it up anyway. But in case you're curious, yes, Nurse Cratchit was in fact woman, Nancy Sullivan. In case
it was.
they
I was going to mention that too. Yeah, her career doesn't get the love that it should because of reasons. It was nice to see her here.
And they actually did their best to not even show her face, but you know they did at one point. It was all her boobs, and hey, you know, she was a good-looking person. We'll say that.
Woman.
Yes. And by the way, the big news is that Paul Orndorff has been suspended indefinitely, which we knew was going to happen at some point because Orndorff has been in WCW now for about 6 weeks. So it was just a matter of when, not if, he was going to be leaving us. And Orndorff, he was here since the beginning, since episode 1. So we had him for over a year and had a lot of good, fun stuff with Orndorff. and it's time to move on. It's territory wrestling, but it's territory wrestling in 1993 at this point. But yeah, so you missed the Paul Orndorff era. Are you sad?
Okay. Uh, he's wonderful.
Yes, he is.
Now, there was another issue that Bullet Bob brought up here. The fact that the heavenly bodies have incorporated, and for some reason, this gives them the right to have any two of the three defend the Smoky Mountain Tag titles. And Bullet Bob saying we gotta figure out what's going on with that. And I don't understand why it is not simply somewhere in the bylaws of Smoky Mountain Wrestling that the guys who won the tag titles should be the guys defending the tag titles.
I hate to use one of Cornette's favorite phrases against him here, but this is lazy booking. And I mentioned this last week. It's a way to say the Heavenly Bodies are going to defend the tag team titles and make you think that maybe it'll be Stan Lane and Bobby Eaton, since they may not be able to use the phrase Midnight Express at this point because it was a WCW term. But in my opinion, that is, that's basically, I don't want to say defrauding people, but if one person buys a ticket because they think, okay, it's going to be Stan Lane and Bobby Eaton, and they get either of the two with Dr. Tom, even if it's a great match, you're going to feel ripped off because you were expecting something else, even if it wasn't patently advertised. So I think that's one of the things they need to watch. Thankfully, like I said, this doesn't last for very long, but I think you run the risk of pissing off fans who are buying tickets to possibly see one thing and not give it to them.
Yeah, that's straight. The Midnight Express was WCW owned because they had prior use, but then does that fall into because Crockett, WCW is Crockett, which bought the UWF, which was Mid South. I don't know. I don't quite understand why WCW would own the Midnight Express when they had prior use.
It's possible they don't, but it's also one of those things that if they wanted to false advertise, hey, there you go. You can't just say the Midnight Express and give them Dr. Tom, but you can say Heavenly Bodies and not give you Lane and Eaton, but make you think, hey, maybe it'll be Lane and Eaton. But yeah. By the way, Larry Santo versus Primetime Brian Lee. Lee wins with a cancellation and for once manages to get in and out of the ring without getting into a fight with Kevin Sullivan. And they're coming up, I think the first blood match either has already happened or is happening this weekend. And yeah, we'll see if both men get to move on with their lives into something new, in the next week or so. But I'm going to bet no.
Poor Larry Santo got canceled way back here in 1993.
And can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. For some reason, it's not echoing in my ear like it usually is. Hopefully, that's not a problem. But I guess we'll see here when I play this Kevin Sullivan promo in a second. Weird. Anywho, so let's go to that promo with Kevin Sullivan and the Nightstalker. Hopefully I can hear this, and hopefully the people listening to this fine audio program can also hear it. If not, I have some post-show editing to do.
With us right now, the Nightstalker, and of course the master Kevin Sullivan. Kevin, what is this incident with you and Tommy Starr that I've been getting mail on? I've been hearing from Tommy Starr.
It was a regrettable incident. It happened when I was aggressive. It happened when I was broken. It happened before Smoky Mountain Wrestling was paying for my therapy and making me calm. It was during a period of my life that I thought I wanted to be a dentist, Bob Caudle. So I knocked all of Tommy Starr's teeth out. But now that they're paying for all my therapy, I'm calm, I'm serene. So people like Brian Lee, Timmy Horner, you have nothing to worry about from me. But Bob, come here. I'm worried about somebody. Don't let him know I'm talking about you. I'm worried about the Nightstalker because at night I hear him moaning and I hear him screaming.
Timmy Horner, Brian Lee. I think he's starting to get real, don't let him know I'm talking about him, real serious problems.
What about that, Stalker?
I only have 3 small problems. Primetime Brian Lee, White Lightning Tim Horner, and now you, Tracy Smothers, want to step in the ring with me? I will break you in half, chew you up, and spit you out. Because remember, I am the Nightstalker, I am hungry, and I need to be fed. He needs to be fed.
Maybe they both need to be in therapy.
I can't believe Bob Caudle would imply that the Nightstalker needs to be in therapy.
I had no idea who the Nightstalker was when I heard the name, and Brian Clark, Adam Bomb.
Yes. Good old Adam Bomb, indeed.
I was quite a big Chronic mark when I was 12 years old. So
Then you turned 13, and Chronic took on Undertaker and Kane.
Yeah,
it's funny because it's like I like Chronic too. I was always a fan of big hosses teaming up, and I always said that Bryan Adams, Crush, maybe saying underrated is a stretch, but I always liked him more than most people did. And I thought they made for a fun team. And people complaining that hey, they're both bad wrestlers. If you put 2 bad wrestlers as a team, it means you're only gonna have 1 bad match as opposed to 2.
yeah, they're a fun team.
So they're feuding. You hear them. They're feuding with Primetime Brian Lee. They're feuding with Timmy Horner, and apparently now they're going to feud with Tracy Smothers, which I don't really think they do. By the way, in case you're confused, I have no idea who the fuck Tommy Starr is either. Like, I don't know if this is something that was supposed to air and never did, but Sullivan talks about knocking the teeth out of the mouth of Tommy Starr. Don't know.
No idea.
Yeah. That is not important. What is important is what happens next. It is the Beat the Champ TV title match. Tracy Smothers going for his 5th, win versus the Nightstalker. And as we said, if he wins, he not only gets $1,000 for winning, but he gets the $5,000 bonus and retiring undefeated as champion. So either way, this is the last Tracy Smothers TV title match. White Boy attacks Tracy with a chair during his entrance, throws him to the post, then drops Tracy with a DDT on the floor. Oh my God, will Tracy be able to wrestle? That bastard, Dirty White Boy. Silence is golden.
Yes.
So let's.
I'm sorry. I'm queuing up a rant here, and I'm go ahead and recap the match, and I'll say my piece.
Okay. So after commercial, Bullet Bob comes out. He announces Dirty White Boy has been fined $1,000, and he says there's nothing he can do since the rules are the TV title has to be defended every week, and he will go to the board to try to get Tracy the $5,000 since White Boy just screwed him out of it. Now, Tracy, of course, being the valiant babyface, did not just take the $5,000. He's like, no, I want to fight for this, and I'll go in there with one arm, one shoulder, and I'll face, the Nightstalker. And it was on. So we get our TV title match, Nightstalker versus Tracy Smothers, and he immediately gets his ass kicked. So this is the longest Nightstalker match we've seen on TV. Not that that's saying much, because honestly, the vast majority of his matches are 30-second DQs. But so this was his first, long match. They did, in my opinion, they kept it simple here. Nightstalker does a slingshot clothesline into the ring. That will always be impressive when a man of that size does it. And basically, he works over the shoulder. He goes for the top rope clothesline. Tracy sidesteps it and makes his comeback. Outruns Dirty White Boy, who brings out a garbage can and scissors. He grabs Tracy's Confederate flag and the rest of his stuff, which distracted Tracy long enough for Nightstalker to hit a power bomb and the win. I'll be honest, like, not having seen this ahead of time, I thought Tracy won. I'm like, okay, it's the first Beat the Champ TV champion. You're establishing it. You're establishing Tracy as a challenger for Dirty White Boy. So he's going to win the 5 matches, get the $5,000 bonus, and now move on to wrestle White Boy. And he lost. Now, we'll get to the angle afterwards, but did you want to discuss the match, or are we just going to dive into the post-match angle?
So, I don't want to get into it in a whole lot of detail, but in another life, I was an aspiring historian of the American Civil War. And something that I was very passionate about was educating the public about the significance of Confederate idolatry. And I gotta say, I am not the biggest fan. I realize we're in East Tennessee in the 90s, but I am not the biggest fan of seeing all these baby faces with their Confederate flags. So when Dirty White Boy came out and started cutting up that flag, he became, as far as I'm concerned, he is the babyface in this feud. And when he handcuffs Tracy Smothers to the top rope and beats him down and burns the flag in that trash can, I gotta say, I have nothing but respect for my Smoky Mountain Wrestling champion.
I will say, because, that was the angle, by the way. White Boy, he handcuffs Tracy to the top rope, throws the flag in there, and lights it on fire. These fans, honestly, were fairly indifferent to it. By the way, Nightstalker was barricading the dressing room door so no one could come out. But eventually, the baby faces got the best of them, and Horner and Rock and Roll ran in for the save, and Horner put the fire out, which, by the way, I was surprised didn't set off the smoke alarms. I will say that 2 things. First of all, while this crowd may not have cared a whole lot, it does inflame some fans, so to speak, and it gets worse in the next few weeks because Dirty White Boy is going to take this in a different direction. We'll say that. Now, I will say, and maybe we'll find out because I haven't watched next week's episode yet, so I don't know if Tracy just gets a new Confederate flag. I believe that Tracy, without the Confederate flag, is still the most popular person in the company. He's not just loved because he's coming out with the Confederate flag. He's loved because he's just a very lovable, likable person. We've seen him now for about 3 or 4 months. He's got that aw shucks kind of thing. His promos, like, they're wrestling promos, but they're not your typical wrestling promos in some way. They're very down to earth. They're very, let me introduce you. And you're left, when you hear him talk, it's like, hey, I'm going to bring him home to meet my grandmother. Like, he's that kind of likable person. Whereas Dixie Dynamite, and I'm not saying that Scott Armstrong isn't a likable person, but Dixie Dynamite wouldn't be popular without the Confederate flag mask and all that.
Tracy Smothers, hell of a wrestler. Nothing but love for Tracy Smothers other than the one issue that I just ranted about.
Yeah. And it's like, I get, you can't, it's hard sometimes to separate everything. And it's like, it's kind of like at least for me, I try to just keep in mind that it's 1993, it's the South. And while this is still obviously an issue in 2024, I don't know. I think it's becoming less of an issue. Although that may just be me living in the North, completely sheltered from it.
Yeah. I just wanted to explain why, for me, as of this moment, Dirty White Boy is the babyface in this feud.
Now, there's a lot of things to love about Dirty White Boy, especially his manager, Mr. Ron Wright. Unfortunately, we don't get a Mr. Ron Wright promo this week, but we do have. What a shame. I know. He is a kindly old gentleman wrestler who's just trying to get the medication for his heart surgery and his hip surgery and all that. And so he's out with Dirty White Boy as White Boy goes one-on-one with Ted Allen. At this point, White Boy...
Ted Allen.
Yes. At this point, White Boy is the General Skandor Akbar of Smoky Mountain this week because he's just all over the damn show. Tracy does try running to the ring to fight, but he's held back by Horner, Dixie Dynamite, and Reno Riggins because apparently the Rock and Roll Express doesn't care anymore. He does eventually get to the apron to throw blows, and the referee... I wrote the referee disqualified him. I guess he disqualified Ted Allen, but I screwed up the notes here. And eventually White Boy just threw up his hands and walked away. And by the way, I did note that throughout the entire match, which does not really go that long, goes a couple minutes, White Boy never takes his belt off.
Yeah, I also noted that we did not get a decision announced, which is one of my biggest pet peeves in wrestling. I think you should always announce whatever the decision is. But I assume Dirty White Boy won by DQ.
Yeah. And however, the match may still be going on. You know, is Ted Allen still alive?
Was Ted? I was just looking. Give me 1 second to backspace. Nightmare Ted Allen passed away in 2010 at the age of 54 of a heart attack. So, R.I.P. Nightmare Ted Allen.
Sorry to hear that. So I think we can, posthumously award Ted Allen the victory for some reason.
Yeah, why not?
So main event time, number one contenders match, Stud Stable with Dutch Mantell versus Rock and Roll Express. Since Dutch left the announce table, Horny tags into it. And he laughs at the idea of being in a position where these two teams are fighting over a chance to get at his team. Cornette says the only reason Bullet Bob is having trouble with the Heavenly Bodies being incorporated is because he can't count to 3. And then says that the fans can only count to 3 if they count the number of teeth in their mouth. Bodies come out with drinks and popcorn to watch the match. And Caudle sends condolences to the family of Andre the Giant as the match gets going. I note the match started slow and tapered off from there. The highlight of the match is Cornette just on commentary dropping one-liner after another here, getting as many of them in like 5 minutes as he could. Golden ends up outside the ring and throws the Heavenly Bodies popcorn all over the place, so Eaton throws his soda at Golden as he gets back in the ring, and Morton rolls him up for the victory. So yes, the Rock and Roll Express are once again your number one contenders.
They subverted the trope here. They got the heat on Robert, and Ricky got the hot tag.
It's funny. I didn't think the match went long enough really to say, somebody really got the heat. It's funny because these two teams have wrestled a lot since Rock and Roll reformed back in August. And I'd say this is probably the weakest of those matches. Because there's going to be more throughout this taping. I haven't watched it, but I just know there's going to be a lot more throughout this taping with these teams. So it's it was a 5-minute match to whet your appetite to what's going to come in the next few weeks.
Something I thought of it earlier, and I didn't mention, but Lynn Fields, who was in the opening match, I wonder if he is a member of that large, extended Fuller, Golden, Welch, Fields family.
I have no idea. I did not even think about that. Len Fields, if you're listening to this and are still alive, are you related to Robert Fuller and Jimmy Golden? Let us know. However, since you're probably not listening to this, who knows? But we're going to end the show here with a promo with the Stud Stable, who have stuff to say. Because why else would they be cutting a promo otherwise?
Now the Stud Stable, Robert Fuller. I don't think I've ever seen a wilder finish in a wrestling match.
I'll tell you what, I'm tired of Cornette's big grin and his good-for-nothing cartooning. Let me tell you something, Cornette. This is not a funny business. This is not a funny world, and you're going to find it out. As smart as you are, figure it all out, son. You may made one mistake. You put your name on the dotted line for your stinking good-for-nothing bunch in Johnson City, Tennessee, this afternoon to take on the baddest of the bad, baby. And I'm going to guarantee you something. It ain't going to be just your bunch that pays. Rock and Roll Express can pay. And then, Daddy, last but not least, Jim Cornell is going to pay his dues, too. They can get out from this one no way light. We'll hit him with anything we got,
And
boys.
let me say one thing. I bring in Shoe Baby with me today in Cornet. I have God my witness. I'm going to whoop you like some Tennessee country cured ham. You get close to me, and I'm blasting you with Shoe Baby today. I'm sick and tired of it.
You're going to find out. I've been soaked down a few times in my life, buddy, but the next time you decide to drown me, use a little Budweiser. How about it? I'll tell you what, you better tell Cornette. You better be ready. I know you don't say no prayers to the good Lord or nobody else, but you darn well better have today, because Johnson City's going to be the end of this mess.
All right, fans, don't forget next week we'll be right back. Our TV title match here next week. The Dirty.
All right, so another really good Robert Fuller promo, and it's sad that, you know, like with other things, he's closer to his last match with Smoky Mountain than his first, because he's in WCW in 2 months as Colonel Robert Parker.
Oh, is it that soon?
Yeah, because I don't know exactly when, but I know at Slamboree he's managing Sid. So it's like, it's 2 or 3 months away. But, you know, he said the one mistake that they've made is booking a 6-man tag with the Stud Stable. He says the Rock and Roll Express will pay, and so will Cornette. Dutch says that he's got Shoe Baby, which is the name of his whip, and he'll whip Corny with it, and I hope it happens. Not because I've got angst against Cornette, just because it sounds funny.
Minor note on the match, Dutch threw a fantastic tantrum when his men lost.
Not surprised. And, you know, it's like, this has been a great feud, although to be honest, and I've said, it really feels like, especially watching this week to week, that the Rock and Roll Express is being shoehorned into a great feud between the Stud Stable and the Heavenly Bodies. It's like, they've had all this heat between the Stud Stable and the Bodies that it feels like we have to shove the Rock and Roll Express in there somehow. And I don't know, in my opinion, it doesn't feel like they're really part of it. It feels more forced and contrived than, I mean, it's wrestling. It's forced and contrived, but I don't know. It's like, I'd rather be watching the 2-on-2 match than the eventual 3-way that we're going to get. Spoiler alert.
I wondered if this was building to a 3-way, because I knew that Cornette invented the triple threat match around this time.
I mean, I don't think we've gotten a triple threat, but we've had a couple 4-ways on this show already. So, you know,
Really?
oh, yeah, there was a 4-way tag back in August, and the first Beat the Champ TV title match was a 4-way. So,
Go ahead, finish.
Oh, I was just saying, it happens.
Did the version of this that you watch have the localized promos?
It does, and to be honest, I usually skip them. Did I miss anything?
2 sets of them. The first one was Tim Horner and then Ricky Morton. It wasn't anything. The second one was first the Dirty White Boy accused Tracy Smothers of being from Canada and then threatened to skin him and mount him like a deer. And then we got Jim Cornette, who I can't remember the exact line, but wherever in rural Tennessee or Kentucky that they were talking about, he said the milkman just loads a goat on a flatbed truck and drives it by, and then said it's where the relationship between a boy and his dog isn't always platonic.
He has such nice things to say about his fans, doesn't he?
Yeah.
But so yeah, honestly, you'll find if you watch those local promos, there are a lot of times where they spoil what's about to happen later on the episode. And it's kind of funny, like how little, I don't say how little control, because, you know, but it's like, I like that, like I don't know why they could have just moved that local promo where they spoil what we're gonna see coming up to next week's show. But at least you didn't get any of that. They didn't have the Rock and Roll Express on there talking about how they won the main event against the Stud Stable.
Well, he did cut a promo on the Rock and Roll Express, but it was after the Rock and Roll Express won the number one contenders match. So,
yeah. But so 56 down, 144 to go. Before we get to the end here, what were your final thoughts on Smoky Mountain this week?
This is fun. Like I said, there are just some things, and I know it's what it is, but it's like I have some personal trauma around certain issues that I get reminded of, and it irks me a little. But overall, this was a fun hour of territory wrestling.
All right. So before we finish things up, we like to tell you what else is happening this week in wrestling. Because like I said, I can tell you February 20th, 1993 until I'm blue in the face, but it helps to say this also happened. So you have a reference point to go with. And I'm going to save the big news for the end. So I'll go with the other two news items first. So the next up was WCW had their Super Brawl 3 pay-per-view, which is the best received WCW show in 2 years since Wrestle War 91. In the Smoky Mountain Wrestling contribution to the match, the Rock and Roll Express beat the Heavenly Bodies, but Smoky Mountain is expected to never be back. And in the main event, Vader beats Sting in a non-title strap match. And also Matt Hardy was in the audience for this show. But that also wasn't mentioned in The Observer, because why would it?
Really?
Yes. And also, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And was the match at Super Brawl a title change?
Vader and Sting, or the Heavenly Bodies Rock and Roll?
The Heavenly Bodies Rock and Roll.
I don't think so, but I guess we'll see in the next week or so. It might have been, but I didn't even, I didn't even process it, to be honest.
It's interesting. We've got a Smoky Mountain tag title match on a WCW pay-per-view, and before the end of the year, we're going to have a Smoky Mountain tag title match on a WWF pay-per-view.
It's technically the same match, even though it's not the same match. And also, Eric Watts' push has officially ended since his dad's no longer in power, and he does a quick job to Vinny Vegas, of all people. And to be honest, I thought this was the end of Eric Watts, but he's actually in WCW wrestling frequently until the summer of 94. So that was a little surprising to me anyway. But the big news, and I'm going to throw out a trigger warning here, depression, suicide, all that fun stuff. The big news this week was the suicide death of Kerry Von Erich, who's the second of 3 major deaths during this 6 to 8 week period after Andre from a few weeks ago. Kerry was headed to jail after being arrested recently and violating his parole. And Kerry had been going through tons of other issues, including losing custody of his daughter, being broke, and owing a ton in taxes to the IRS. Of course, this was the most recent and thankfully the last Von Erich tragedy to this day, as he follows in the premature deaths of brothers Jack, David, Mike, and Chris. So that is the big news this week. So just letting you know. And oh, by the way, the Iron Claw is now on Max, in case you've never seen it.
I haven't watched it yet.
We did a review of it a few months ago when we watched it in the theaters. It's a movie where if you're me, or especially if you're Dave Meltzer, you need to turn your brain off, because there is a lot of factual inaccuracies. It's still a very good movie, don't get me wrong, but it will make your head explode if you can't turn your brain off, if you know time frames and things of that nature.
Yeah, that's why I've been reluctant to watch it.
My favorite is still, Fritz watched Ric Flair beat Harley Race in the main event of Starrcade 83 and then walked outside and told Kerry it was time to get into pro wrestling.
That math doesn't math.
For a number of reasons, not the least of which is he wouldn't have been watching Starrcade 83 on TV, in 1983.
Yeah. And if you listen to our other show, Kerry was already wrestling far earlier in 1983.
Yeah. And it's like the famous Kerry Von Erich Ric Flair cage match was a year before that. But that's just one of many things that if you're me and you know all that stuff, that it'll drive you crazy. But again, the movie's still fun. I'd still recommend it, but just again, shut your brain off a bit. But that's gonna do it. So Trae, you've made it through both shows this week. Are you still alive? Are you still with us? Are you still psyched for this?
Yeah.
If it helps, you have a week to recover.
That's these shows are easy to watch. We're still kind of getting our rhythm. I didn't know, like, what do I need to make note of? What are you gonna make note of? Probably it'll get better because I'll know a little bit more about what I need to say as opposed to what you're likely to say. So, as Terry Funk said on the first episode of ECW TV, give us some time and we'll get better.
There you go. All right. Then, and hey, you have 8 days to prepare for the next one because I'm going to be in Pennsylvania till like next Monday. So we'll do the show Monday night or Tuesday. We'll figure it out. But yeah.
All right.
But anywho, so that's going to do things here for Smoky Mountain. For Trae, I'm Aria. Thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you again next week.